How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend out there on the West Coast in sunny California, Nick Norman. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing well. Lovely 4th of July day today, dressed for the
Mm-hmm.
occasion and just enjoying a day to celebrate our country, even though it's not a perfect country and may have problems, but just stoked to spend time with some family and friends. How about yourself out there in Texas, man?
Yeah, it's great. This is our first 4th of July here in Texas, and man, it is different than the culture of 4th of July up in Massachusetts, like we've been experiencing the last 4 years. So it's nice and sunny, not too warm today. I mean, it's hot. Don't get me wrong, but not as hot as it has been recently. So it was nice to we went and spent a little bit of time in the pool, and now we're just sort of hanging out here, but we have some things to talk about. It is we're nearing sort of the end of the big level news of NBA free agency. There's still some things that are expected to happen, but a lot of those big dominoes that we sort of talked about or that I mentioned last week have started to fall. Um, PG has gone where he's going to go. Clay has gone where he's going to go, and all of those things have happened. So it'll be it's exciting that now we get to talk about it a little bit. So we're going to start by just doing some really basic winners and losers. So Nick, why don't you give me one of your winners of free agency so far?
Man, first winner of free agency, which actually pre-free agency, I believe it was the day before, but the New York Knicks. I am a huge fan of the vibe of the New York Knicks right now with the Nova boys, the Villanova guys who are coming together now with Josh Hart and with, oh my gosh, with Mikal Bridges and with Jalen Brunson and with Dante DiVincenzo. That's what I was thinking. I was like Pods, but no, it's not Brandon Podziemski. Podziemski and DiVincenzo kind of
Yeah, a
mixing
little
together
bit.
in my brain, both being Warriors white dudes, but just really stoked for them. I love the chemistry. I love how that team has just played with effort under Tom Thibodeau. And
Mhm.
so my first winner would be just like Knicks culture and the Nova boys. Love having the Nova boys together. And I think that this makes them an even better team, a contender, although they may have overpaid for Mikal Bridges. I like the fit. I like having another wing defender to pair with OG Anunoby. And OG Anunoby being re-signed also I consider a big win. And so I feel like them having these two nice, really good defensive wings to be able to handle Boston, who obviously are the big dog to beat, I think is critical. And so super stoked for them as a contending team.
Yeah, I think it's what's crazy is the Knicks team that almost made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year will look completely different at the start of this next season. And they've only upgraded. Julius Randle will come back from injury. They kept OG Anunoby, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and he's coming back from injury. They got Mikal Bridges. They're setting themselves up for major success moving forward. I would say that my first winner is Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama, because the Spurs signed Chris Paul to a 1-year deal, and good for Chris Paul. Getting another deal here, getting to play with another team, add to his Shaquille O'Neal rainbow, more or less. We just need to find some way for him to be in green, and then he'll really be able to go all the way across. But Wemby will now have an actual distributor at the point guard position. That was probably the biggest hindrance for him last year. And he still ran away with Rookie of the Year. So it's not like not like he was subpar with the roster that the Spurs had, but getting CP3 is just going to really help his development. We've seen a lot of guys take that next step because they've gotten to play with CP3. I mean, we can go back to the Clippers and Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan and how good they became when they had CP3. Then he went to the Rockets, a Rockets team that had James Harden, but wasn't really doing much postseason wise before they got CP3. And then they had a couple Western Conference Finals appearances against those Golden State Warriors. And then went to Oklahoma City in the trade for Russell Westbrook, where He was sort of like the throw in to get Westbrook to Houston, and took Oklahoma City to the playoffs that year, and then took the Suns to the finals. So wherever CP3 has gone, he's made guys better and helped dudes improve. So really excited for Wemby, and to see, you know, what Pop is able to draw up for the two of them moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And although not a free agent acquisition, their draft of Stephon Castle in the first round at the 4th overall pick, I believe, should be a great dude to be able to develop with CP3, and somebody who CP3 is able to mentor and able to really work into being a stable facilitator and a quality player all around in terms of his fit, especially with Victor Wembanyama as the cornerstone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nick, give me another winner.
Yeah. So my next winner would be the Brooklyn Nets. I know the Brooklyn Nets haven't made a ton of moves, but my biggest reason for why I'd consider them winners is simply their return for Kevin Durant has finally coalesced in terms of what it looks like with the Mikal Bridges trade. And so I believe it came out to 8 or 9 first-round picks, as well as swaps, as well as having Cam
Johnson.
My brain's saying Cam Thomas, but he's already on the Nets. But yes, Cam Johnson, as well as getting Bojan Bogdanovic. I think they could flip him as well for more assets too, to a different contender, although he is on the older side and he is oft injured as of late. But I think that their return overall in terms of the draft capital they were able to recoup is really a worthwhile really turned out to be a worthwhile endeavor in terms of just what they got back from the Kevin Durant trade. And that's not even including what they were able to get back from the Kyrie Irving trade. And they're still able to flip Dorian Finney-Smith, and they could get even more picks or quality players for an older veteran player who can definitely contribute to winning if traded as well. And so I think that there are other moves to make for these Brooklyn Nets, but I think that the singular move they made with Mikal Bridges, I'd already consider a win, especially when you consider in the context of him not being a superstar, but going for that level of draft compensation.
Yeah. The thing with the Nets that I would put them as a too early to say, because I want to see what they do with these picks. I think if they hold on to them and only use them to draft players moving forward, then I actually am not sure that they're using them as best they can. I think that a good move for them would be to try to use some of those picks to make a splash for a trade, because some of these picks, I mean, they're like, 4 or 5 years from now. And by the time that pick comes, guys that they're drafted this year, drafting next year, will be at the end of their rookie contract. And so I'd like to see them maybe use some of the picks to trade to get some guys, or like you said, use Bogdanovic and Dorian Finney-Smith to get some other pieces to help facilitate some trades, to just kind of speed up the process a little bit, but still also hold on to a majority of the picks to be able to stay young with that as well. But yeah, Brooklyn is doing as best they can, considering how much of a failure the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden experience was. I think they've done a really good job to try to get the train back on the tracks there. My next winner, even though they have really done practically nothing, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I say that because they were able to return Donovan Mitchell. They're able to return Donovan Mitchell, and I mean, if they lost him, then I feel like they would have to start blowing the whole thing up. At least by keeping him, they can remain playoff competitors for a little while. Or they've got him for a few years, and so they didn't trade him at the trade deadline this year, and everyone was saying, well, he's going to play his last game in a Cavs jersey in the Eastern Conference semifinals when they played Boston. Being able to get him back for a few years, now they have him to be competitive for the next couple of years, or they have someone that they can actually trade and get serious assets for in a couple of years as well. I think that I want to see the Cavs make a couple more moves. There's still some guys left that are kind of surprising current free agents that they could bring in and maybe get a roster good enough that they can be competing for that 4 or 5 seed again this year, like they did last year. So I really think that the Cavs keeping Donovan Mitchell is a serious impact for them moving forward, just as an organization and as a franchise. Where the loss of him, this Cavs team could very quickly look like the Cavs did between LeBron leaving and going to Miami and coming back. So I think it's a really big win for the Cavs, for the culture, and just for the organization.
Would you say, if you were to put money on it in terms of Donovan Mitchell, do you think he makes it a year and a half with the Cavaliers from now, in terms of, like, I don't know that he's traded after this year, mid-year this year, but do you think he makes it to mid-year the season after that? Because I feel like definitely with the fit in terms of Mobley and Jared Allen being a tough fit together and him being a tough fit with Darius Garland, I feel like something's kind of got to give there. And I feel like Donovan Mitchell already being a player who was traded once from the Jazz, do you feel like he could be traded sooner rather than later, even considering the contract that he was given?
Yeah, so the weird thing with the Cavs, looking at their roster right now, and what the contracts are like. So locking him up, Jarrett Allen only has 2 more years, including 24-25. Jarrett Allen has 2 more years. Karis LeVert has 1. Max Strus has 3. Evan Mobley only has 1. And so I think if they can lock up Evan Mobley, then I'd take the over on the 1.5 years. If they can't, then I don't know, because then they are setting themselves up to try to blow things up a little sooner. I think that Donovan Mitchell is a better player than Darius Garland, and they've got Garland through 27, 28. And so I think that Donovan Mitchell they can get more for than Darius Garland, and teams would be much more willing to take on $50 million of Donovan Mitchell than $42 million of Darius Garland. So I think that basically what the Cavs did is they gave themselves a chance to try and be a little more competitive. And if not, they gave themselves a much better trade asset than what they would have otherwise.
Yeah, I think you make a reasonable point with that, because definitely trading for an asset who you have under your control for several more years. But my issue is that asset may be under your control for several more years, but he'll probably ask out sooner rather than later, potentially, if he's been moved once and he could be moved again. And so who wants to be taking on an asset that's who wants a used car that both of the owners had to get rid of it? So yeah.
Right. I mean, it depends on who the team is, so yeah. It's not, from everything that I've seen and heard, Donovan Mitchell, where he is during the season when he's playing, he leaves his business at the door when he walks in the locker room, and he goes and plays and gives it his all for his team. So, I don't think that there's as much risk of having, the disgruntled employee as maybe some other guys, maybe some other players in the league that have tried to do the same thing. So we'll see. Nick, give me one more winner.
Yeah. My last winner would happen to be the Boston Celtics, not as an organization, but as the players. Just their bank accounts must be looking massive after this season. Drew Holiday getting his extension during the playoffs, I believe, and Jason Tatum getting his this year during free agency, as well as getting players under your control with Derek White, and last year they got Jaylen Brown under their control as well. So they just have everybody re-signed under massive contracts, a bunch of max contracts. And you can look at that as a win or not if you're a Celtics fan or the Celtics as an organization. But those players got to be sleeping well at night knowing their pillows are stuffed with a lot of dollar bills, A lot of bills. A lot of bills paid out to those Celtics players, man. And they're worth it. They finally won the championship. Once you win
Yep.
it, I feel way more comfortable paying everybody boatloads of cash when you got a ring on your finger, you know?
Yeah, no, I hear you. Derek White, locking him up, that was really big. They took care of Drew Holiday during the season, then took care of Derek White, Jason Tatum, obviously. So they're sort of big four there. I mean, they're in a great place. I forget, has Porzingis gotten paid yet?
He hasn't received an extension, but he definitely has at least one more year left on his contract.
He actually has two. He's got this coming season and then the year after. So they've honestly they've got time before needing to take care of him.
Right.
And maybe the owners have time to sell like they're maybe trying to do right now, which is crazy. But when the fees are that big, when you got to pay your guys. Yeah, my last winner here would have to be a very slept on winner, but the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder made a move before free agency started. And once free agency started, it was all about what's Paul George doing, what's Klay Thompson doing, what's LeBron doing. And so it didn't really get talked about. But they went and they got Alex Caruso from Chicago. They got him for just Josh Giddey straight up, which I feel like is such an improvement for the Thunder. Let alone the off the court issues that sort of have come up in the past with Josh Giddey, but just the play in general. I mean, you bring in a veteran presence to a very young team. You bring in a great defender and a guy that's going to really, really change the locker room and change the culture of the locker room. We saw it on those Laker teams that were early. Him sort of being that spark plug, being that guy early in the LeBron era, being that spark plug, being that guy that players rallied around and wanted to see succeed. And when he succeeded, everyone else wanted to play better. And so for a very young team, I think looking here, Kenrick Williams is the oldest guy on the team at 29. Now adding Alex Caruso at 30. For a very, very young team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, by the way, only 25 years old. I feel like he's been in the league way longer, which he has. He left college pretty early. But to add a veteran presence, a guy that has been in those big moments, I feel like you could definitely make the argument that in the Western Conference semis when they lost to Dallas, that was just the sort of the nature of being a young squad. They've been there before. They had a guy who's been there multiple times before. And I think that just makes this Oklahoma City Thunder team that we're like, okay, they had a great year, but was this sort of a flash in the pan? I think that can really, really help them to elevate to, no, we're competing in the West and we're competing for the 1 seed again in the West.
I definitely agree with you, Jack. I think that the addition of Caruso is a very nice addition. And they also got Isaiah Hartenstein, who is a very quality contributor. They might have overpaid him a little, considering he was paid, I believe, $29 million a year, which is a big contract. Yeah. But I believe that for matchup-specific stuff going on in the West, I think you need another big body to throw at Jokic, because I don't think that you really want your only – I really don't think that you want Jokic to be going up against the bigs that you currently had. I think you need a little bit more thickness there, and I think Isaiah Hartenstein can do that for your team. And absolutely. I think that just as you were saying with Alex Caruso, I think his ability as a connective piece as a defender, as somebody who you can throw at an Anthony Edwards or somebody who you can throw at a Kyrie Irving in order to give SGA a bit of a break, or to give J-Dub a little bit of a break as well, trying to do these perimeter-oriented, smaller guard type of defensive matchups. I think that if you're looking at the players in the West who you really have to worry about, it's really big dudes like Jokic, or it's smaller dudes like an Anthony Edwards, like a Kyrie Irving. And then you have like the one thicker dude in terms of like a Luka Doncic, who's a real problem to defend, and nobody really has a great defender for Luka. But I think Lou Dort is a very quality defender for that. So I don't think the Thunder needed to add somebody for that specific matchup. But I think their ability now to mix and match defensive and offensive pieces against these teams in the playoffs just improved by a large margin. And I think that if you look at the depth of these teams in terms of also the Thunder re-signing Aaron Wiggins and re-signing Isaiah Joe, I just think they have a really deep, really young, really improving team who you have a lot of dudes who you can throw at whatever playoff matchup you have. And I think they're as injury proof as you could get for a team outside of like the Celtics. The Celtics have 4, 5, 6 really high quality dudes. And like they lost Porzingis in the playoffs for a good stretch, but like still they really were a much better team with Porzingis. During that game 1 in the finals, Porzingis lit Dallas on fire.
Especially in that first half.
Exactly. And I think that if you're looking at the Thunder outside of an injury to Shea, I think that they could survive an injury to almost anybody else and still be a really, really good playoff team. And I think there are very few teams that, like a Denver, if they lost Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter Jr., I don't think that team quite has the necessary tools to beat some of these other teams. But like if you have Isaiah Joe injured, if you have Aaron Wiggins injured, if you have J-Dub injured, I think that you're able to slot in other guys and really are able to throw a lot of wing pieces at other teams. And other teams just don't really have that same luxury. So I'd consider the Thunders to be really big winners as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is they brought Alex Caruso in. He's only got 1 year left on his contract, but they have a ton of salary cap space in the next couple of years. Next year, right now on their books, the Hartenstein deal included, they have $23 million available there. And then the following year, they've got $50 million available in cap space, so they can bring him in. I haven't heard that a deal has actually been made. An extension hasn't been made yet for Caruso, but this doesn't have to be just a loaner for a season to see what happens. They've got the space that they can re-sign him for a few years and lock him up moving forward, which is great. And also they don't have any guys on their payroll right now that have a player option. Also huge. It means that the contracts that they have, the Thunder are in complete control of. A couple guys with a team option, which makes that even better. They can cut guys if they're like, you know what, hey, we're not going to pick up your team option. It's not necessarily worth it to us, you know. So they're looking scary, let alone all of the draft picks that Sam Presti has put together. So let's move on to some losers, because there have been some teams that really haven't done much or have lost a lot, or were, you know, teams that it's like, hey, we're going to go get this guy, and that's going to be our big move that's going to really change the trajectory of our team, and it didn't work out that way. So Nick, give me one of your losers of the free agency so far.
So I would just I actually have 3 losers to just package into one, because they all have a very common thread. And that would be Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry. The 3 dudes who I would say were the poster boys for 2010s basketball, and LeBron James for obviously longer than that, being a superstar from a very early age in the 2000s. But these 3 dudes are on teams that are playoff-ish teams when you include the Warriors, who borderline were a playoff team. But with these teams that are playoff-ish teams but not championship contenders, and all 3 of them don't really have a way of getting from that level to a championship contender level. And so I'd really consider all 3 of those guys specifically losers. If you're LeBron James, I don't think you look at the season being like, okay, our goal and a realistic one is to win the championship. I think that's setting your eyes on something that it's far more likely than not you're going to be pretty dang disappointed. I think Kevin Durant getting smoked by the Timberwolves last year, if his eyes were set on a ring, I think he'd be crazy for that as well. And I think Steph Curry, considering the state of the roster, that will be a pie in the sky, way too high for them as well. And so I feel like for those three dudes who have been superstars in their own right, Steph staying with his same team his whole career, and Kevin Durant and LeBron James moving around to other teams. But I don't know that it's really in the cards for them to ever really be super relevant in terms of in the playoffs for the rest of their career. And that's really, really sad. I think Kevin Durant, will he sniff a Western Conference or Eastern Conference championship again? I would doubt it. Would LeBron? Maybe. Would Steph with this current Warriors roster? I think the answer is soundly no. And I think that's really, really sad. Not even in the NBA Finals, but in the championship round, that seeming to be something that we would all bet against. I find that to be incredibly depressing for the players. And so I really hope they make a move, whether moving to another team or acquiring a player onto their teams. But those three players I'd consider losers.
Yeah, I think of those three, you're right that Kevin Durant has, in my opinion, the shortest straw when it comes to trying to compete for a Western or Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not willing to give up on the Warriors quite yet, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a little bit. I think that some of the moves that they've made aren't necessarily the moves that would make them a championship contender, but are moves that push them actually from play into playoff team, unlike they have been in the last couple of years. So we'll get to that. But so far in free agency, the biggest loser to me has been the Chicago Bulls. And most of that, I mean, first we could talk about the moves that they've made. They re-signed Patrick Williams to a 5-year deal. They brought in Josh Giddey via trade, and they signed Jalen Smith to a 3-year deal. But they lost Alex Caruso in trade. They lost Andre Drummond in free agency. But you know who they haven't lost yet, and they're desperately trying to lose? Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. And no one is willing to bite to take on that contract. Zach LaVine has $43 million guaranteed this coming year. He has $45,999,660. So basically $46 million guaranteed in the following year. And he has a player option for $48.9 million for the 26-27 season. And if he picks that up, then that's all guaranteed as well. So the Bulls are trying to blow it up. They wouldn't have traded Alex Caruso if they weren't trying to blow it up. He is a guy that you build around. I talked about him earlier when we talked about the Thunder. He is a guy that if you're like, no, we're competing, you do what you got to do to keep him there. You definitely don't trade him. You know, if he leaves a free agency, that's one thing, but you certainly don't trade him. DeMar DeRozan is a free agent. He is off the books. Lonzo Ball has a player option that he's certainly going to pick up. And hopefully he's able to finally play again. It's been rough. I've been wanting to see him play because once he got out of the shadow of his dad and all of the craziness that he was doing, Lonzo Ball was quite the contributor on the teams that he was on. So hopefully we get to see him play this year. But they want to get rid of Zach LaVine, and no one is willing to take it. I mean, I would imagine that if they asked for a second-round pick for Zach LaVine, most teams still aren't willing to take it because of that contract. So I guess, you know, the Bulls are they're hurting because they don't have the money to go and try and make some signings in free agency right now because they only have $7 million in cap space, where if they were able to get him off the books, they'd have $50 million in cap space. They'd look more like the Pistons. And outside of him, they've got a decent squad to kind of build around. You know, their oldest player on the books is Nikola Vucevic, and he's only taken up $20 million a year. And for his productivity, I don't think that's that bad of a contract for them. They've got Io DeSumo and Kobe White. You know, they're two young point guards. They've got them cheap for a couple more years. They just traded for Josh Giddey. They've got Torrey Craig for one more year. You know, so like they've got some pieces that are like, if we can finally get our big name guys off the books, you know, to rebuild, they actually have a decent squad that they're going to start that rebuild with, but they can't do it because of his contract, and no one's willing to come near it. So I would say that Chicago so far is at least to me the biggest loser in all of this.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely get behind that to one degree. I think the Giddey for Caruso trade was abysmal. I think that Josh Giddey, 29 out of 30 teams view that as a negative asset to have. Josh Giddey, the Thunder were happy to be giving him up. If you look at his strengths and weaknesses, his strengths are passing and his weaknesses are everything else. And man, I just view that as you're trading Josh Giddey, who's a incredibly weak asset, for one of the most coveted role players who's a 3-and-D guard who any contending team would want on a one-year deal. So it's not even like it's particularly punitive contract-wise either. Like, I'm sure every single contending team would say, yep, we'll take Caruso. I think if you're looking at even these teams that I was talking about before, like I think that the Suns, the Lakers, the Warriors, like I think they'd all love to have Caruso. I think they'd all love to have a defensive-minded guard who can shoot. And so I feel like, and just being the Bulls settling on that, when over the last year it's been said that their asking price was 2 first-round picks and stuff, I don't understand why they wouldn't settle for 1 first-round pick and maybe a little bit of filler. If I was them, I think I would probably take a first-round pick, a little bit of filler, and just call that a day rather than Josh Giddey. And so besides that, I think that them being able to move off of DeMar DeRozan, considering his free agency, I think if you look at DeMar DeRozan a year or two ago after the injury to Lonzo Ball, I think that team that was looking like a very, very good team before Lonzo's injury, I think that post-injury, when you saw that team kind of fall apart, I think you just look at DeRozan as an older player that's not going to be able to stick around, that doesn't play both ways. And I think you should have traded him for assets then. But now as an older player, as a more offensive player who hasn't particularly became a good three-point shooter, I think that they should have traded him sooner, and giving him away in free agency for nothing, as well as giving away Caruso for less than nothing, and now being stuck with the LaVine contract, which seemingly is considered a detriment, considering that like he might be on the same tier of asset as Bradley Beal, who was traded for another negative asset. And so it just seems like Chicago somehow got stuck with all these negative assets, and that's not really what happened. They created this conundrum for themselves. And I think if you're looking at LaVine being traded to, like, maybe the Warriors would be a good fit, like trade him for like Wiggins or something like that, and maybe some more cap and just be like, okay, Steph, now you have another dude who can shoot, who can kind of make his own shot, and you just get off of the contract. I think that would be solid, but I don't know what the Bulls are supposed to do here. The other spot maybe would be like Pistons getting a shooter next to Cade. I think that could be fun for Cade. I think the Pistons have cap room. And so I'm like, maybe you do that as the Pistons, but I don't think you give up any real assets for that, considering you're a disaster team currently, but like, sure, absorb the cap space and have a fun player next to Cade. So
yeah, it's weird. It's weird because like LaVine isn't. I don't remember LaVine being like a terrible player, right? So like, you know, it's not that. It's just that this is the contract that he has, and he's not worth, you know, $50 million a year like some of these other guys that are getting paid that much are. the big thing when I think about the Caruso for Giddey trade is that was a straight up trade, and their contracts money wise are extremely similar. Like, I think Caruso is at just above 9 million right now, and Josh Giddey is at 8.3 million. So it's not like, oh boy, good, we got that massive cap hit off the books. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like Chicago really mismanaged all of this. I mean, it's been like a weird year and a half of them being like, yeah, we might sell, but we're only going to sell for what we're asking for. And now they're like, well, all of our assets that we could have sold aren't sellable now, whether they left on their own or, because I remember like a year and a half ago at the trade deadline, there were a lot of teams that would have taken Zach LaVine, regardless of his contract. They would have loved to have that impact, on their squad. And now teams have filled out. We're this far into free agency that a lot of teams that had cap space don't really have it anymore. And so the Bulls are just kind of out of luck with this. I would say, you grouped your losers together. My other loser is DeMar DeRozan, because he's still out there, and this seems eerily similar to me as when, a few years ago, Isaiah Thomas became a free agent and was like, he, was not that long ago a MVP caliber player, though DeRozan is not, that from that long ago, but still a upper echelon player in the league. And it's looking like wherever he goes, he's going to have to sign for the vets minimum. Which is tough considering Chris Paul got 11 million from the Spurs. I don't see why DeMar DeRozan isn't worth that much. There was talk that the Lakers or that LeBron would, be willing to take less for the Lakers to get DeRozan, and the Lakers were like, no, we're not going to do that. So LeBron just signed for the 2-year max anyway. So it's just tough for DeRozan. I think, as he's nearing the twilight of his career, he deserves a little bit better than this. I think there are a ton of teams right now that if they went and got him, he would be a great piece to add to their squad, especially a lot of these, competitors in the Eastern Conference that are just trying to get a little bit closer to Boston. I think Miami would be a great place for DeRozan to go here. Miami's not shied away from taking on some veterans at older age just to get the last little bit out of them. They did that with Kyle Lowry. They've done that with Kevin Love. They did that with Ray Allen back in the day, right? So I think that would be a great place for him, but it's just not seeming to happen yet. So tough for DeMar DeRozan. But let's move on to talking about some of these really big impact moves, because some of these are really, really big considering how maybe timid and tepid was the word I was looking for, free agency has been so far. So Nick, what would be the one move that you're like, hey, this is the biggest impact move to me?
Yeah. For where my mind is at, I view Klay Thompson as being a big impact on the league move. Although he does have impact on the Mavericks, I believe that the domino effect that the Klay Thompson sign and trade could have is way more massive than that. I think that Klay Thompson, the basketball player, although his stats may look similar from the past over the last 6-7 years, I think pre and post injury, Klay Thompson, the offensive numbers have looked somewhat similar. I think that Klay Thompson, the player, obviously isn't as athletic as he used to be, isn't able to defend at the caliber that he used to. But I view Klay Thompson as a player that is going to be able to hit open jumpers and going to be able to really be a play finisher in converting these wide open shots that Luka and Kyrie are going to be able to generate. I think that if you're looking at like PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr., like PJ Washington lit up the Thunder, I believe. He had a 30-point game, at least one of them against the Thunder. And that was because he was just getting a ton of wide open catch and shoot threes. And when you're talking about PJ Washington being the player who's converting those wide open attempts, I think that you're viewing that as like, wow, he did a great job in doing that. But when you're talking about Klay Thompson, a top 5 3-point shooter ever, I think you're going to view him as the perfect catch and shoot player there. I think that he's going to provide a good deal of size. I think that he might not be a quality defensive player at this point in his career, although still okay in that area. But I think that his ability to really convert these high quality shots that Dallas was missing against the Celtics is really going to be a big deal for the Celtics team, whose offense really failed them in this playoffs. Their defense did a really solid job against the Celtics, but the thing is, like, their offense just wasn't able to really ever break into a good rhythm. And so I feel like Klay Thompson, although not a good playmaker, is going to be a good play finisher for this team.
Yeah. I think that definitely is going to change what their offense looks like. Or defenses can't shrink in as much to defend that lob that the Celtics were able to do, because they were like, we're willing to live or die by Derek Jones Jr. ability to hit a three-pointer, or PJ Washington's ability to hit a three-pointer. It's going to make it easier for them to do that. When Luka is making those crazy, ridiculous, no look behind the head passes out of the lane once he's double or triple teamed, you feel a lot more confident about Klay Thompson hitting those than some of the other guys. My only thought when it comes to the Mavs with that is, like you said, the Klay Thompson that they got is not the same one that was guarding Kyrie Irving during the NBA Finals. Those few years there. And so where during the playoffs and especially the NBA Finals, Jason Kidd was trying to hide Luka Doncic on defense. I think that now you definitely have to, unless Luka does, like we talked about, after the finals, really, really takes a step forward and becomes a much better defender, you may have to hide Luka and try to find a way to hide Klay a little bit. Which, yes, their defense was good, but I don't think their defense was good enough that they're able to take a hit on the defensive side. So I think that offensively they improved, but I feel like defensively the way that they sort of fell, it's like how much did the scales balance in the end from this move? But it's certainly a move that the Mavericks in the locker room and to their fans can definitely look at them and be like, no, we're trying to win. This wasn't, to us, it wasn't just a fluke. To us, this wasn't just like hey, we're a couple years ahead of schedule, in terms of being competitive in the NBA. So I definitely think when you look at it that way, it's a good move for them.
I would also say, though, that the bigger ramifications of the Klay Thompson sign and trade is for the Warriors, in terms of, like, I don't think the Warriors are that much worse with Klay gone, but I think that this could be that domino that could cause Steph to leave, that could cause – we've just seen a trail of dysfunction that's just cutting through the Warriors organization, whether it's management leaving, whether or not it's the Draymond punch, whether it's Jordan Poole becoming a huge distraction and having to leave. And now Klay is just another domino to fall, that the Warriors fall from grace. Even from that 2020 title, I think that the low points have been far more frequent than the high points. And I think that this is just another low point that could sink their ship. And although their young players are good, I think that Klay Thompson leaving could be that nail in the coffin that a year from now, 2 years from now, Steph Curry might just fold up shop and say, hey, we need to do things differently. I need to be traded, or we need to trade all these young dudes, and that could change everything. And so I think the long-term impact, one direction or another, caused by Klay leaving could be massive.
Yeah, I also would be interested to see the parallel universe where he stays and he forces, or he gets what he wants from the Warriors, and the impact that would have. Because all of this stemmed really from, they won the finals Andrew Wiggins got the bag, which at the time he deserved. Jordan Poole got the bag, which at the time he deserved. Steph got the bag again, which at the time he deserved. And Draymond Green and Klay Thompson were already taken care of at that point. They didn't need to renegotiate. Then it got to the point that Draymond needed to renegotiate. He got the bag. Klay had a really subpar season for what he's used to last year. Then is like, I want my money too. They're like, we don't have the money to pay you, and you just had not a great year, and we think that's the sign of what's to come. You know, what if Klay does get what he wants from the Warriors? You know, and then where do the Warriors end up? I think Bob Myers left, the previous GM left at the right time because he's like, I got us this ring, and I don't know what I'm going to be able to do after this. And so he left, and you know, is now at ESPN resting on his laurels. I think the biggest impact move. I think the biggest impact move is PG-13 to the Sixers, but I think outside of that, the biggest impact move is a move that I feel like is seriously being under discussed, undervalued, and that is the Knicks bringing back OG Anunoby. They made the splashy trade for Mikal Bridges, got all the Nova guys together, and that was the big talk, you know, when it came to the Knicks. But OG Anunoby is maybe the most important player when it comes to the team ability, and the entire group that the Knicks have. Do you want to know the record that the Knicks had when OG Anunoby was on the floor for them last year? They went 20-3. They lost 3 games after they traded for him when he was on the floor. And those losses were an 8-point loss to the Bulls at the Bulls. It was a 4-point loss to Orlando at home, and it was a 4-point loss to Dallas on the road. They beat the Celtics twice after getting him. They beat Minnesota twice after getting him. They beat Denver once after getting him. They beat Milwaukee a couple times after getting him. I mean, he came in, and he is what put them over the top there, that got them up to that 2 seed. And so, like, yes, you brought Mikal Bridges in. The vibes are going to be so high because of that, you know, between Bridges, DiVincenzo, Brunson, and Josh Hart. But, you know, OG Anunoby is a starter on that team, and you were able to get him back, and I think he was the most important thing that the Knicks could do. They lost Hartenstein, you know, but I think that bringing OG Anunoby had to be the priority and was the priority, and they did that really, really well because he comes in as a guy that is a really, really great defender and a really, really good offensive producer. Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo are really, really good defenders, but their offensive numbers pre the crazy playoff run for them were that more of a role player. And now that Julius Randle is coming back, now that they have Mikal Bridges, and now that they got OG Anunoby back, DiVincenzo and Hart are likely going to be moved to the bench. And so also getting Anunoby back just gives the Knicks a ton of depth. And that was the nail in the coffin for them last year. Was too many guys were getting hurt. So being able to keep their primary defender, and a great offensive guy, is what, in my opinion, is what's going to keep the Knicks as a competitor in the East. And I think, you know, the Boston paid their guys, which they had to do, and that was the main focus of this free agency for them. But I think the Knicks adding OG Anunoby makes them that much closer. Or not adding, but retaining makes them that much closer, and makes the Mikal Bridges trade look that much better because he's being added to the team instead of, you know, replacing OG Anunoby there.
Does it concern you with Hartenstein leaving? Because I feel like the team overall is obviously very, very talented. But with Hartenstein gone, you're depending on Mitchell Robinson and his health. And if he's injured, you're getting Jericho Sims and a lot of small ball lineups. And so would you be worried about that? Because besides that, I think this team's in pretty good position as far as their depth.
Yeah, I think that they definitely need to go and try to get uh, another big man. Um, I mean, I think every team needs to do that nowadays. There was the time of the small ball, but we're moving back to you need to have a center. I mean, look at the last 4 MVPs have been centers, right? So you need to get back to that. You need to have a productive center. I don't necessarily know what that looks like for the Knicks, because they lost Hartenstein, and Hartenstein, if they had kept him, I mean, I think he's pushing Mitchell Robinson out of the starting role going into next season. He definitely earned that last year. But I think we'll see. I think there's still still guys like Precious Achua who they've held on to, is at least a body. He's not never going to be competing for all NBA, as a big man or as a center, but it's at least it's somebody that you can put out there to spell Mitchell Robinson a little bit. I would be interested to see maybe are the Knicks a team to keep an eye on when the Bulls try to trade Nikola Vucevic. I think that would be a good get for them. So there's some talk about should Minnesota trade Karl Anthony Towns. I think if they tried to do that, that might be somewhere that we might see the Knicks. So I think that it is a little concerning. But also I think that they have defenders like OG Anunoby and Julius Randle that can defend a little bigger than maybe the position that they play. They were able to get away with playing small ball, right? They were able to get to the 2 seed playing small ball at times. So I think we'll see. It'll definitely be interesting, seeing them competing, on I-95, heading south to Philly and going and facing Joel Embiid, or heading north and having to face Porzingis. How's that going to work? But I'm not as concerned as I would be if they lost Hartenstein and they lost Anunoby, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Achua is also a free agent, and so they likely will be able to re-sign him, but he's not on the team currently. And so their center depth is very thin.
Oh, that's true. Where did I see? I must have missed something or seen something that was inaccurate about him coming back. So we'll see what the Knicks do there. I think that the guys that they lost compared to what they brought in or brought back is much better for them. And I do think, looking right now, they are a little bit over the cap, but most teams are, so they could still go and sign some of these guys that are a little surprising that they're still left. So we'll see. Let's move on to some stock up, stock down. We've got a few teams here that we're just going to go through, and do we want to stock up? Do you want to stock down or hold? We can obviously hold the stock. So maybe more of a buy, sell, hold instead of stock up, stock down.
Yeah.
So Nick, the first team that we've got here is the Golden State Warriors. Are you buying? Are you holding? Or are you selling?
I would buy stock in terms of their long-term stock, that they're not going to bottom out and be in the running for the number 1 overall pick in the next 5-10 years. So I'd be buying that stock, but in terms of their stock as a championship team, I'd be selling that stock. This seems like one of those situations where the right thing to do is a Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett from the Celtics, sell it and try and really get your return on it now. But it doesn't seem like that's likely what they're going to do. And so this seems like a management stock down, and they're not going to be able to get their return on it.
Yeah, the Golden State Warriors are weird. So it was just, announced today the Buddy Hield sign and trade from Philadelphia to Golden State for a second round pick in like 2031, I think. And they've got him for 3 years, 10 million the first year, 8 million the second, and then like 3 million the third. Instead of they were able to orchestrate it backwards instead of, forwards. And so if you look at Buddy Hield's production last year compared to Klay Thompson's production, I feel like they got similar value for a much cheaper price. They got a little bit younger. They got a little bit better defense. The other big thing for them is they got Kyle Anderson they were able to lure him away from Minnesota, which I think is a good piece. So I think losing Chris Paul and Klay Thompson and filling their roles with Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield makes them younger, makes them better defensively. So I don't think that they're competing for the championship in a loaded West in the next few years, but I think that the stock is up, and I think I'm buying that they're going from being a play-in team to a top 6 team in the West.
Ooh,
I think that
that's bold.
I think that they can do it. Looking at some of these other teams, every year it's like, oh well, the Clippers and the Lakers, both of those teams have gotten worse, if you ask me. Maybe the Lakers have sort of stayed the same, but the same for the last couple of years has been the play-in, right? The Clippers have certainly gotten worse losing PG. So you look at the West, and those top 4 spots are like, there's going to be a dogfight between Oklahoma City, Denver, Minnesota, and Dallas for those. But that 5-6, I feel like there are a lot of teams that could sneak in there, and I think Golden State's going to be a team that's going to be competing for that.
Okay. Would you take them over the Pelicans right now as currently constructed?
I would not take them over the Pelicans right now as currently constructed. I think it's closer than most people think, because the Pelicans did lose Jonas Valanciunas. So they're going to be playing a lot of small ball, with Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson as their 5 maybe. The CJ McCollum thing hasn't necessarily worked out as well as I think they would have hoped. Brandon Ingram is a guy that a lot of people are talking about, like, are they going to try and move this offseason? They probably should try to move. So I think that's actually pretty close, but I do think that having consistent good point guard play from DeJounte Murray does notch them up. I don't think I take the Suns over the Golden State Warriors right now. I don't think that, I definitely don't take like the Trailblazers. I don't think I take the Kings. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think that I do. They returned Malik Monk, which was big for them, but other than that, have they done anything? Let me pull them up here. They re-signed Alex Len and Malik Monk. They added Jalen McDaniels via trade from Toronto, but they also lost Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov in doing so. So I don't know. The Kings didn't make the playoffs last year. They had a great year a couple of years ago as a 3 seed, but since so I don't know. Like I said, I think that 5-6 is more open than maybe you would think. So that's where I'm at the Warriors. Next team up, the Los Angeles Lakers. Stock up, stock down. We buying, we selling, we holding.
Man, I love the Warriors, or I love the Lakers because I love LeBron. You said Lakers, right?
Yeah. Lakers, yeah.
Yeah. I love LeBron the player, and I think that selling them now would probably be the right thing to do, because I think that LeBron was healthy basically the whole season. AD was basically healthy the whole season. AD had a really good season. LeBron had the best shooting season he's had in a decade. And I'd probably bet against that. I'd probably say this team is regressing, and like Max Christie's going to be improving and getting better. And And Austin Reeves is getting better, but I don't know that those improvements via age are going to make this team better. So I would probably sell them at this point in terms of, like, I think they were being a pain in the butt for Denver in a couple of games in the playoffs last year. And I think that maybe they could do that again this year because Denver has gotten worse. But I don't know that they're going to be – I don't think they're going to make a Western Conference Finals like 2 years ago. I would sell my Lakers stock.
Yeah, I'm selling my Lakers stock. I'm selling it because it's, a little bit higher right now because they drafted Dalton Connect, which I do think is a great draft pick for them and will be a great piece for them in the years to come. And they drafted Bronny James, and there's all that hype there. And because of that, I think the stock is moving up when it really shouldn't be. I do think that JJ Redick is going to be a great coach in the NBA. I think he's got the mind for it. But like you said, AD and LeBron were basically healthy all year last year, and they could only manage to be the 7 seed, right? Mm-hmm. What is the likelihood of that happening again? Like you said, they haven't found a way to get rid of D'Lo and upgrade there. Austin Reeves is getting better. Max Christie is getting better, or at least they paid him as if he's getting better. So like there's future post LeBron, probably post LeBron and post AD, good things to see there. But right now I'm selling it all on the wave of the JJ Redick hire and the draft. Our next team that we have is Minnesota. Are we buying? Are we selling? Are we holding with Minnesota?
Man, I'm gonna buy more. Man, I'm in between holding and buying more stock because I think Anthony Edwards as a player is a superstar on a path to being a top 5 player potentially. I think his ceiling is probably in the ballpark, if not higher than Jason Tatum, who's pretty soundly top 5, I would say. I'm just very concerned about the ball handling and playmaking in terms of with Minnesota because I feel like I think Karl Anthony Towns shouldn't continue on in his role there. I think that we've seen either bad fit issues or foul trouble issues plague him. And so I feel that in this current construction, I think that they're a terrible matchup for Denver. But I feel like they just have some really tough half-court offense issues that should get a little bit better with age, but I don't know that they really have the off-the-dribble playmaking shot creation aspect that I think elite teams need.
Yeah, I think I'm holding on this one. I definitely think that the best is yet to come for this group. But you look at their roster, their primary ball handler, especially now that Kyle Anderson left, is Mike Conley, and Mike Conley is 36 years old. Now, they have him for cheap. They've got him. They have him for $9 million this year and $10 million next year. So it's not like he's eating up, a boatload of cap space. But I think I'm holding. They brought in Joe Ingles. We'll see what that'll do. Veteran presence there from him. Who's been there before or been around before. But yeah, I think I gotta just hold on this one. I definitely think, like I said, the best is yet to come for Anthony Edwards in particular. I'm a little more bullish on Karl Anthony Towns than you are. But still, they're paying him a lot to be, where his ceiling right now, it feels like, is 25 points a game and, risk of foul trouble, and doesn't really have the motor that he used to. So we'll see sort of what he's like this next year. Rudy Gobert is always an offensive liability, no matter how many defensive player of the year awards he wins. So who's to say what that'll look like? But I think I got to hold on this one. Our next one is the Miami Heat. Where are you at on the Heat stock right now?
I think the Heat are a really pretty dang good drafting team, but I would probably sell my stock. I think the best of Jimmy Butler is in the past, and I don't know that they really I think their window's closed. And I think that they have a plethora of guys who are plus NBA players, more or less, who can score 7, 8, 9, 10 points. I think they have a lot of those guys. But I think their window as a championship team is closed. And so I would sell it. I think that Jimmy Butler could be traded. I think that Bam Adebayo is a great defensive player who's a great matchup nightmare defensive player against players like Giannis. But I think they're not going to make it to another championship. I think it's unlikely they make it to another Eastern Conference Finals with this core. And so I would probably say that their stock's going to dip more than it will go up from here.
Yeah, this one's tough for me, obviously, because I'm a
Right.
Miami Heat fan. I agree with you though. I don't see them necessarily competing for an Eastern Conference Finals with Jimmy Butler still there. I think we've just seen too much of he's not just all the way there during the regular season, and then they get to the playoffs and he goes crazy. I mean, he even did it this last year in the 2 play-in games that he was able to that he played in, before realizing that, oh shoot, I tore my meniscus. I played the remainder of that play-in game on a torn meniscus, and you guys got to do the rest. And we saw what it looked like when those guys did the rest. I think they've got just too much money tied into some of the guys on this roster, and I do think that their championship window with Jimmy Butler there, as the roster is currently constructed, is closed. I think they need to find a way to get rid of Tyler Hero. I think that they, like you said, they draft really well, and they do have a really great young squad. They locked up Bam Adebayo for a couple more years. That was definitely something they needed to do. They still have Duncan Robinson, who is 30 at this point, so he's getting farther along in his career, but he's still definitely helpful and is contributing. They just traded for Terry Rozier. I wasn't totally sold on that one. They re-signed Kevin Love to a couple of years. They re-signed Thomas Bryant for a year. But I love what they've got in the tank with the young guys in Jaime Jaquez. I do like the draft pick of Khalil Ware that they just had. I like Nikola Jovic. So they've got pieces that once Jimmy Butler moves on, they're not going to be falling to lottery pick, right? I think that this team will still this next year be competing for that play-in. Maybe if they can stay healthy, maybe they sneak into the top 5, top 4. But I'm with you that I think this is a place where I don't think you should sell, because I think it's pretty low right now already. I think, but definitely this isn't the time to buy with the Miami Heat. So the last team that we have, and we talked about them a little bit earlier, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Nick, are we buying, are we selling, or are we holding stock with the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I think with this current roster configuration, I think you hold, but I think if they make a quality trade, I think that if you're a betting man and you're betting on them making the proper trade, I think you should buy now. But personally, I would probably sell, just in terms of, I don't know that they're well run, and I don't think the fit with their players and their positions is very good. I think they've done a very good job drafting in recent years with Evan Mobley, with Darius Garland, but I don't know that management really has a good picture of what this team should be, considering the trade for Donovan Mitchell. It seems like that trade was more of a wanting a superstar than wanting to build a proper team. And I think that vision is probably why you should sell this version of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that this
Yeah.
team could definitely develop into a better team via trades and moves. But I think that involves pretty good sized trades in terms of trading one of their bigs or one of their guards. And so I would say to probably sell this stock.
Yeah. I think I'm selling. I think that, like we talked about earlier when we talked about Donovan Mitchell,
Mhm.
I think that he doesn't actually make it all the way through the end of this contract with the team.
Mhm.
Whether that's next season, the year after that, or in his final contract year, getting traded. But
Yeah.
I don't think he's long term there in Cleveland. And it might not even be because he decides, like, I want to get out of here. It might just be because Cleveland's like, listen, our ceiling right now is the 4 seed in a conference where Boston is winning 65 plus games every year. So I think they are a fun watch when they're healthy. They'll give anyone a good fight. But as a championship contender, I'm definitely not there, and I think that they're only gonna fall off and get worse. So I'm definitely selling the Cleveland Cavaliers stock. But Nick, it's been fun. It's been a blast talking NBA free agency. Who knows? There's still some rumors going around and circling about some guys. Potentially a Russell Westbrook trade to Denver. That could be interesting. There's still some guys that are still free agents, like DeMar DeRozan, like Tyus Jones, like Malik Beasley. So there's still some things that we're waiting to happen. But all in all, this is sort of how things are gonna sort of shake out. It feels like, unless we find out that KD is requesting a trade from Phoenix or something crazy like that, right? So we'll see what happens, and if it comes up, we'll talk about it. But it's been great enjoying this Independence Day, talking some
Mhm.
ball, talking some free agency with you.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you all so much for tuning in, for watching, and for enjoying this. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Have a good one, everybody.